Is that what you're saying, Anthony?
I can hear
Oh.
you.
Okay. Can I have the tissue box down here? Chris,
Sorry.
these meetings make me cry.
All right, Madam Mayor, it is 5:03 and we are live.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Monday, November 7th, City of Lake Worth Beach Commission workshop regarding a discussion of a possible request for proposal regarding the housing crisis. Madam Clerk, can you read can you take the roll?
Yes, Mayor Betty Resch.
Here.
Commissioner Sarah Maliga,
Present.
Vice Mayor Christopher McVoy.
Here.
Commissioner Kimberly Stokes.
Here.
Commissioner Ronaldo Diaz.
Here.
You should be led by Vice Mayor Christopher McVoy.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, I'm sure staff has a few things that they want to talk about. I had a couple, as I was driving here tonight, I had a couple of thoughts I would just kind of like to start. So this is loosely based as a discussion regarding an RFP. I have two questions and maybe, I don't want to see if we can have kind of a cogent meeting. And I thought maybe two questions would be kind of guiding us. The first question that I had, and I hope there's an answer for this of staff, do we have any, and I read the scope of everything that was discussed in the memo that we got. Do we have any idea of how much such a survey would, in the RFP, how much something like this would cost?
Madam Mayor, I can tell you just conceptually, staff and I spoke about this earlier on, and our best guess would range between $100,000 to $200,000, depending on the scope of the services.
Okay. And then my second question, this is more just to kind of put it out there to frame our conversation tonight. What specific concrete advantage or purpose will have something like this done? Spending that kind of money, which is a lot of money, what would our specific aim be for having such an RFP? And I'm not talking about maybe we could, but I really want to narrow it down to what will this money, how will this benefit the city? And what purpose will this serve? So I see Commissioner McVoy has his light on.
Yeah, and I think those are both sensible questions to guide our discussion. They seem very reasonable. I have a feeling, just informally from having been in Brown universities and university studies, if we were to get an academic group to do that, it would be nothing like $100,000 or $200,000. I think you'd be looking at much more 10 to 30,000 sort of range, maybe 10 to 20 to 50,000, but certainly nothing like 100 or 200. I think if we went with a consulting firm, yes, consulting firms typically bill at 150, 170, 180 an hour. And, maybe you get something for that, maybe you don't. In this case, as I noted in my note, I would make sure that we had the RFP written in such a fashion that either consulting firms or universities could apply. And there's a good reason that universities are cheaper.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we
Often students getting involved, and now there's an educational benefit for the students, and and
like with FAU, like we work with FAU.
yeah,
Right.
Yeah, and I think my number may have also included the cost collection from the original scope that we were speaking of. So that number may be included in that.
Included the election, the cost
Cost of the election.
of an election, okay, which again, we can't have until 2024 or November of 2023.
24, because and as you recall, originally, we were speaking of having an RFP, that would also include a referendum concerning rent control.
Right.
And as we met with the supervisor of elections, we found out, we knew the deadline for submitting the request for placing this referendum on the March 2023 election. The deadline was December 9th, and we could not meet that deadline with an RFP. So then now it leads us to where we are today to just discuss a housing study, which would not involve an election.
Okay, which is the second part B of my question, which is, what is the purpose? Because one thing I thought about, if we have something done, and Commissioner Diaz had mentioned, if there's a grant out there, if you have that kind of information, I like heard that. But if we do it now and the grant, and there's nothing out there right now, and 6 months or a year later, I know that the city doesn't accept things like documents, like surveys that are over, they might be dated by the time we actually got to a point where we could use it for a specific purpose. Commissioner Malega's light is on.
My question is just, why are we not looking at the County Housing Leadership Council report that just came out? I mean, the county has done extensive research to be able to put their bond referendum out. And I don't know why, I mean, I understand that, like Commissioner Diaz said, having that data for us is great for grants. But if we could at least start with the Housing Leadership Council's report and then factor in all of the houses or homes that we've approved already, how many of those are coming on as workforce or affordable? That data is important to our decisions, I think. And then what other projects are coming down the pipeline that, that are going to fit into that housing, affordable or workforce housing. There is something coming before the CRA tomorrow, which is a big project that is supposed to be aimed at affordable and people who are on fixed incomes. So I'm interested to see how that comes to play. But I just wanted to throw that out as well.
Yeah, I just think that we have to be clear in our purpose as to why we, I'm not saying it's a good thing or a bad thing, but I think we need to be clear in our purpose of why are we doing this, whether it's 50,000 or 150,000, it's, Commissioner, Commissioner Diaz.
Yeah, I mean, it is disappointing to hear that from the SOE, and just so everyone knows, like, no elections are going to happen for a year because they said that they're moving their offices, that nothing can happen in terms of elections for an entire year, which I'm curious about that response myself, but definitely heard on those concerns on what can this be used for. And I think to your point, Commissioner Malega, I think you're right. Like, the county is a starting point, and I think what we should look at, and from who I've talked to at places like FAU and these academics, I think an RFP, and also keep in mind, if we put out an RFP, if we're not presented with something that we think is going to meet our needs, it doesn't mean we're committed to choosing one. So, there's the kind of minimal harm in putting out the RFP just to hear what we can get out of it. And to Commissioner or Vice Mayor's point about academics, yeah, an RFP should be open to everyone. But I think if we, include the academic side, I have had some, pretty interesting conversations and heard really interesting ideas of the people who do this kind of work and are able and willing to take it kind of to the next step on not just providing like a typical housing study that we generally get in terms of like inventory and economics and numbers. That stuff is hugely important and we need that. But there's also an opportunity of innovation and tying those numbers and housing availability to some of the other issues that we're dealing with, right? And houselessness. On yesterday, we maintained Joel Steinhardt Cove, and I had to clean out 2 camps on that shoreline. And, there is a correlation, like deep down, I think we all know that there is a correlation between affordability, not just housing, but healthcare costs, everything that we have to pay for just to exist as human beings. There's a correlation between that and, crime and houselessness and other things like that. And amazingly, there hasn't really been a housing study or much, we've have piecemeal things that kind of allude to that, but we haven't really had a truly like comprehensive look at all of those things and those connections. And I think, if we put out an RFP, that's something that we're clear on, is to ask about what kind of innovative data that we can get that's going to be helpful, not just for funding opportunities, but also from a planning perspective. Like the more we know about our community, like the county data is definitely a really good start and is really important. But, in terms of research and science and data, we want that higher resolution. The more we know about our community and how it fits into the county and things like that, the better understanding we're going to have on what we need to do as a city to help, address some of these problems. Because I have some ideas that some of them are not, they're not necessarily super radical or innovative ideas. They're things that are employed others. Like one thing I would love to talk about at one point is, I think as a city and the CRA both should be putting a lot more emphasis on land acquisition, because we all drive by a bunch of vacant lots, a lot of grass fields in our city and key locations, a lot of vacant properties and whatnot, that I feel like if we owned them as a city, if the owner has them now and they don't want to do anything with them, if we owned it, and I'm not saying we should buy properties now, maybe we should like start looking at planning a fund or whatnot, because when the prices go down, we should be ready to buy. Because if we own these vacant lots and we have really good developers coming to town saying like, I want to do this project, maybe our incentive should be like, awesome, you bought this property from us, you can do what you want on this, but we also have this other lot. Can you, build us a truly affordable apartment? This is done in places like Broward and other places. It's not hugely innovative, but having data, like a really high resolution, understanding of Lake Worth Beach and housing and what we need for inventory, and what we need to provide and what we can do. Like, I think that'll be helpful in us coming up with these long-term plans and growth management policy and whatever is needed to encourage what needs to be done to help affordability across the board.
Commissioner Stokes.
Yeah, so to answer some of the things that were brought up right recently, and bring it back to what we had in our backup, this sample RFP. I am interested in more than just the quantitative data that was listed here, and I understand that this document is just as a starting point for discussion. So I agree, like it would be pretty easy, and other groups have done this. We can easily get the income distribution, family size, housing demand, all of those things. But something that having, especially an academic institution, do is that they can actually do surveys, they can do interviews, and they can collect other data that's more qualitative in nature, but done in a professional way, not just an anecdote here and an anecdote there. So I would like us to actually expand this a little bit to include other things. What I've been saying consistently for over a year, as elected officials, I think it's really important for us to understand the effects that this is going to have on our community. There are downstream effects that we've been knowing about for over a year, and we just had a whole budget season pass without talking about them. And I think it's important for us to have something that is neutral, independent, professional, that really helps frame the biggest thing that we're facing right now as leaders in this community. So I would like to have a study done that talks not only about what is our problem, what are the effects that we're going to see from this problem, such as the increase in people who are unhoused, the strain it's going to put on our social services, the strain it's going to put on our institutions like education and public safety. So I think we need to understand what we're dealing with. And I would love to know how much the previous commission paid for their tourism task force study and all the work that went into that. So, I don't think $100,000 is what we'll get back unless there's some really ambitious consulting people that are trying to get on here. But I think we should put this out, see what comes back. And my focus is more about the effects of this, that we don't have all of that right now from the county data and specific to our community. I had a question for legal though. And maybe our city manager is, did we reach out to FAU or any other universities, or like do we have to go the RFP route? Or if there's somebody out there, like what we did with the redistricting, we didn't put out an RFP for that, I don't think. We just went to FAU and we said, hey, we're partners. Do you have a team that would want to work on this for us? And they did, and we moved forward with it.
Unless Elizabeth have an answer or reply. Okay, you're correct, Commissioner Stokes. We did not do an RFP for the redistricting, and I don't think we are required. We don't have to do an RFP to seek out for FAU to do a study on this part, and it's Elizabeth.
Wanted to work with an education
Whether it's a private or public school.
And with that too, to keep costs down, I was told we could write into an agreement, RFP or anything, that we're not going to pay for indirect cost. So we're only going to pay for the cost of the people doing the research and the time, everything directed, but not the indirect cost of like rent. Like,
Rent?
oh, yeah, you're renting,
Universities often add, their Office of Sponsored Research will often add indirect cost to it. And
Okay.
sometimes you can push back on,
yeah.
especially if it's smaller.
And again, I'm a really concrete person. So, and I'm not disagreeing with anything that's being said. Commissioner Stokes, from this study, and again, I'm going back to the concrete, identifiable purpose of doing something like this. I'm just curious what you see as not just the interest in knowing our city more, but how this would be useful to us, and what would we do with it?
If we have the data showing what we can expect and what we might be seeing by the time we finally get this off the ground is an increased strain on our social services and an increase in homelessness, then we can go out and partner with the county. We can ask for grants. We can decide how we want to use our remaining
But
ARPA
don't we know
funds.
that, I'm really asking, don't we know that already? Don't we know?
I don't think we know the extent of this problem. I don't think we do. And I think, I don't know, maybe some of us are scared to know the extent of it because then we have to face it.
Well,
Because I don't see the harm in additional information. I don't think it's going to be a crazy amount of money. We spend money on studies all the time. I know there's definitely thoughts about that. Maybe we don't need to spend as much, but I think it would really help us when we're working with our other representatives at the state level, when we're working with the county, when we're working with our own budget to really
just have the
know.
information at our fingertips.
Right. And this is why we want to put resources here.
Mhm.
It's not because Commissioner Stokes is some crazy bleeding heart that only cares about the people who have nothing. It's because Commissioner Stokes cares about the entire community and the effects that this housing crisis is going to have on all of us due to all of the effects, the trickle down effects that happen when people can't afford to live and the strain that it puts on all of our services.
Okay. I see Commissioner Malega, she's not spoken yet.
I actually.
I
had
did.
my-
I know you were first, but she hasn't spoken yet. So- You spoke, all right, then Commissioner McVoy, Vice Mayor McVoy.
Thank you. I'd been thinking about it a bit more since working on that a while back. And as Commissioner Stokes said, and thank you to the city manager for including that. The reason I tried to do a draft a while back was just to try to encompass what I had heard so far in our discussions. I think I wrote back in mid-October. At that point, we were very focused on the state statute and meeting the criteria for that. And it became clear along the way that that's a pretty high bar. Maybe we could meet it, maybe we can't. But it seemed pretty clear that there was interest in understanding our community better, and both primary, what are the effects of this crisis, and what are the secondary ripple effects from it that I think we can easily imagine, but don't have quantitative data on it. I'm going to say two things in relation to that. One is, in terms of getting a sense of it, We had an activity that my wife organized at Rudy's Pub yesterday. We made soup for that occasion. One of the things that struck me, and it was very focused to people who are interested in Venezuela and kids of political prisoners, whatnot, pretty narrow focused thing. We wound up feeding a fair number of homeless people that just happened to come by. Then the quantity that came by was striking to me. I was not, and I do go downtown and notice them, but and that's very anecdotal. What does that mean? How do you extrapolate that over the whole city and over multiple days and who knows what? Maybe the soup smelled really good and the word got out all over town. I don't know. But that's where I think, I think we do need to understand what is our situation. It's just good planning practice. If you're going to make decisions, you need to understand the lay of the land first. The other side of what I'm going to comment is maybe when we were working on this before, we were a little narrow in our focus, and I'm guilty of that. Maybe we ought to expand it a little bit to say affordability of our community, which clearly housing is a very big chunk of that. Housing costs, can go from 30% ideally to 50% or more if people are housing stressed. But in our town, electric costs, and well, in many places, cost of utilities, especially the electric, is a big part of that. And maybe we should expand the scope a little bit to understand who is getting affected by this and what does their household life look like under the current conditions. I'm not quite sure how to go about that, but I'll throw that out that maybe the scope should be a little wider. And the other thing I would throw out on the RFP, I know that we could do a interlocal agreement with the university. I kind of like the idea of an RFP in the sense, and I think I would add a little bit more than what's in there that says, hey, we will score the applicants higher for ones that propose some additional things that we haven't thought of, that you from your experience think would be important issues. We'll mark that as creativity and it's an opportunity for us to crowdsource information to help our city better.
Commissioner Malega.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A couple of things. The first time this came before us, I had asked for an update from legal aid in regards to
We never got
the funds. We still haven't received that, which is disappointing to me. I have also requested an update on what we consider the L&M update from Dana, and we still don't have that data. We still haven't seen, and the reason I'm bringing this up is because this is about housing, this is, homes, and I feel like we have all these moving pieces. We have all these pieces of a jigsaw puzzle on a table, but we haven't even framed it out with a strategic plan yet. So when I think about doing a puzzle, you always do the frame, right? So you know what you're working from, and then you work inward. And I want to be very clear that those are three things that I think that we need. And I do support doing some kind of study. I think we need to cap it at what we would spend, because I don't want to spend $100,000 when I know that we could put a dent on housing for that. I also know that the county just received $12.2 million additional in rental assistance this week.
Yeah.
That they're just sitting on. So there is money out there, you guys. I just want us to be mindful that some of the reason that this money can't be attained is because of unscrupulous landlords or people who just don't claim their taxes or don't do the things they need to do to get access to the money, right? So we can't fix that. But for people who are listening, who are in a rental situation, it's up to 12 months rent that's available through the county right now. And that's anywhere in Palm Beach County. You don't have to live within unincorporated. As far as the CRA and the partnering, Commissioner Diaz, of buying up lots,
They're doing it.
they've been doing it for years and they're getting slack. So, I know that there's 7 individual lots alone that have been purchased. One of those was dedicated this Saturday to a veteran through Habitat for Humanity and Veterans Build Initiative. That's moving the needle in my world. This is a woman who was a single woman, 3 adult children, or 2 are in ROTC in the high school, one's serving in the military. She was outbid on every house she tried to buy. So it took her 2 months of paperwork, 2 months of interviews, and now she's going to put in 400 hours, but she'll have a home here in Lake Worth Beach. And to me, that's that concrete you're asking about, Mayor. Is like, how are we, can we put that kind of money into more veteran build projects? I'm 100% supporting that, right? Can we put funding behind affordable housing and affordable homeownership and workforce housing. But I feel like right now, again, from staff, I need as a commissioner who knows how much money we have put out for legal aid, and we've paid Dana for a study and we don't have anything back. So I feel like we're throwing another thing out there without having any foundation to build upon or a plan for all of this data that needs to come back to us. And so I'm going to put the request again out to staff. Please get us an update on these things. I think it's important so we know if, you know what, if we need to stop the legal aid thing because we only helped 5 people and transfer those funds to a better program, we just need a little more guidance, I think, right now on what we're doing to be able to be as impactful, like Commissioner Stokes said, on this trickle down effect. Where are we the most impactful? Where are we getting our biggest ROI? And how can we put this all together and know that we're hitting all the I's and crossing all the T's?
Are you suggesting, I'm just trying to clarify, are you suggesting that we would not go forward with this RFP before we had those numbers or concurrent with it? Because we know there's going to be a problem bigger than just the.
Correct. No, like I said, I'm okay with supporting this RFP, but again, we need to cap it like we did legal aid.
Mhm.
And we did the study with the third party negotiator with Gulfstream. We just can't say, go out there and bring us, an RFP for 100,000. We need to stick to a
Right.
firm number. We know that we've put money aside from ARPA for housing. We have that set aside. So we kind of already put a little bit, we have our plan somewhat. To me, we need to bring that framing in, and that is part of the strategic plan. So I support the RFP, but again, before we even have anybody present to us, would like to see all this other data and updates on these other projects.
What about limiting the RFP to educational? I'll get you just, what about limiting it to educational? If we know they'd be cheaper. Just a thought, what if we just, reached out to, with a proposal, just all the colleges in Florida, and just see what they come back with? Because I don't want to set a limit of $35,000 if it's going to be $60,000.
Might answer, we don't know. And then we'll know if we need to go out to private sector, I guess.
Just a thought. Commissioner Diaz and then Ms. Davis.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's all very reasonable. And in terms of what's already been done, it's we have a lot of anecdotal data, right, to go on and making these decisions. And I think the way to look at it, and you're not wrong about, legal aid and L&M. I think those are all these important pieces. And I feel like a study can be made that makes it all cohesive and brings it all together to formulate into a really solid strategic plan. Because so far, the strategic plan that we have has not been as precise, I think, as we need it. A really good case in point is like, we know we have really exceptional population growth. And one of the things that really blew me away by the FAU numbers, other than our deviation and inequity in our districts, but the other big thing that stood out was the 4,000 people in the next 2 years. And so we're going to have 4,000 extra people potentially in the next 2 years, have the things that have been done in the last decade on schedule. Are they bringing us to where we need to be? And I think a housing study like this, the first thing, because I totally agree, we should not take on a study unless we're committed to it leading to effectuating real change. And one of the first things that it needs to do is it needs to set us some goalposts and say,
Right.
in 5 years, we need this much at this price range, this much at that price range, so on and so forth. So we have a really clear, concise, because we can sit here and say we need more affordability. But I feel, it's a lot better from a planning perspective to make an informed decision. And it's a lot more comfortable when we can say, yeah, we need more affordability, but we need, it's a lot better to bring it down and say we need this much more, these many more units by this time. And that, I don't want to put too many examples, because I kind of agree. We want to listen to what universities or consultants, you never know. We got a great deal on Mr. Sanders and stuff. So you never know if a consultant is really like, we want to, do it for pennies because this is an innovative thing.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, it's just a matter of getting that understanding and that data so we can make better informed decisions and make sure that we're on schedule to meet the demand that whether we like it or not, we're gonna face. And who knows, maybe the study might say that the demand really isn't as bad as we thought it was. You know, I think it can go, I have a lot of hope that I feel like it could go either way. And yeah. Yeah, and hopefully, but you never know until we know. Like, we all knew our districts were inequitable, and then we were all blown away by just how bad it was when we finally saw the report.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, Ms. Davis is next.
Yes, I appreciate Commissioner Maliga bringing up the legal aid, and I apologize. I thought we sent it out to everyone when you requested back in October. We did get reports, so I can give a quick verbal, but I'll send it to you in writing. Of the $50,000 that was allocated to legal aid for assistance regarding rental issues, a total of 61 cases were addressed. Of the $50,000, the remaining budget is about $8,600. That was as of mid-October. So they certainly have been very active and almost have completed the $50,000 funding that was allocated for that purpose.
Do they
So-
tell us what the outcome of those cases were?
No, it's just more so the budget. This was for the eviction prevention
Right.
and associated issues.
So we don't really know how the money was spent, whether it was legal fees or.
I will
Yeah,
dive
I'm
deeper
sure
and get
to
you that
break that down.
information. Yes. So that's the status of that. And I'll get you that in writing.
Mm.
In addition, as an update for L&M, as you recall, I think the last meeting, we did give an update concerning the demolition activities and that we'll be pursuing that very shortly. Last week, staff also met with Treasure Coast Planning
Mhm.
to get an update on their work in presenting some options and ideas concerning the development of that site so that we can pursue an RFP for a developer. So we anticipate that full presentation to come to the commission around January.
Thank you. Commissioner Stearns.
I think Vice Mayor McBoy had his light on, but because what I wanted to say is really relevant to what we're talking about right now and it's short, I'm gonna,
Okay,
um,
you won't mind.
I also, part of the RFP that I think I didn't see in here as a starting point was what is the output of like, what are we asking back? Like,
Mhm.
so reports are great. I also think that they should do a presentation
Mm.
to the commission, just like with the gerrymander, no, gerrymander.
Joe.
Don't tell them I said that. Redistricting.
Again.
Just like with redistricting. We're not doing gerrymandering. The reason we hired somebody else to do this for us is so that we wouldn't get involved in any of that. So
Yeah.
with the redistricting, if he would have just sent us all a report and we all got it in our inbox, like, no, but he came, he did a presentation, then he did it. If it led to community engagement, he helped and he participated in some of that, is going back, refining it and doing another round of engagement. So I think that a report, definitely a presentation to the commission. And I don't know how, depending on what we're seeing, I think we know we've had a hard time educating the community and reaching out to the community and things like that. So we might decide that we should put on a public forum or something of that nature. And it would be nice whoever's
Sure.
involved in creating this report to be there to help lead
Yeah.
discussions, answer questions, things like that. So I think we definitely need to put it in there. And I was really impressed with the timeline of the redistricting effort because, we engaged with him. We saw the original numbers. He did them. Everything's gone so smoothly. I know
This will-
not everybody loves all the maps, but the process, I
Right.
feel like,
It was numbers. It was mostly numbers.
yeah. So I think, if we want to set up our expectations to follow something more along that, like we want a report, we want a presentation, and there may be some community engagement.
And I think that would be in the RFP, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I'm just,
Include
yeah,
work
got it. So, okay, Commissioner McBoy, then we're going to go back to Ms. Davis.
I'm hearing a lot of good things, very helpful suggestions. I think we should definitely add to the RFP, the request for proposals, a not to exceed number. And we could try to come up with that right now. To me, 50,000 might be a reasonable number as you add in. And I think the suggestion that was just made of not just a report, but a presentation, certainly to the commission, but probably also some
Couple
community
public,
outreach,
right.
community engagement, that will add somewhat to the cost, but it's not, I don't think it's crazy. I mean, I don't think it's a crazy amount of additional.
This is
cost.
I mean, as I look at this is a very inclusive list, and a lot of it is very sort of loose. It's not numbers of who lives where. Um, quantificate, what does this mean? Quantification of short-term rentals, time trends, insane, not insane. How do you do that? I mean, there are people that probably know how to do that, but it's not like, give us the numbers and divide it by 4. So, so to your point, I would say, picking a number without really knowing what the number is out there, I would say bring them back if there's a number that looks like pretty close to what we feel we can do. Rather than us limiting it, because I don't know if $50,000 is too much, not enough.
From experience messing with that, I think, and I'm certainly not a numbers guy, but people will generally tend to look at what you're asking. It's certainly the RFP should say that, lower price products, if they meet what we want, will,
Well,
we're not a wealthy city, we will certainly give you more
And
credit.
that's the responsiveness of the,
Right, and there's language, Valentina knows how to do that stuff.
she does.
I think it wouldn't be a bad, maybe make it 60,000 if you want to leave a little more room, but that gives people sort of an idea. Are we, mobilizing 500 people to do surveys or no, we're not. Can't do that. Can't afford that. And it's not needed.
And maybe none will come back at that price, which would teach us something else. Commissioner Diaz.
William's not up there, so maybe I can delegate stuff, but that's the price you pay, but things
He
like,
is available. He's on the Zoom.
oh, there he is. Maybe things to talk about, and this is a good conversation with staff and whatnot. I have brought up previously, about the need of when we look at growth management and policy, there's a lot of good in bringing in the outside perspective and help and whatnot. And maybe that's something that can ask for out of this, like maybe post report and presentations and whatnot, maybe one of the things that we take action on this study. And this is very topical, by the way, because I'm dealing with this with some state environmental issues. But, when a group provides a really well-researched, chef's kiss report, and it's amazing, and it's all the data that we asked for, and then you take it to Tallahassee and none of your recommendations make it through legislation. It's painful, right? And on a smaller scale, maybe one of the things we can talk about is the report, the data is awesome, but how about a continued partnership? And I've brought up, bringing in outside perspective to help us with growth management and things like that. And if the, whatever university, school of land use, innovation, policy, and, there's many out there, if they want to continually participate in helping kind of massage our policy to address the concerns that are coming out of this study, that I think is a really good ask, I feel like, and might also come into play on how much the study costs if it really comes with, a continued partnership. Because I don't want to read a study and be awesome, let's do it, and then we're left in no man's land. It'd be
I don't know
awesome.
how to do it.
Right. It would be awesome to be we've looked at this and we know this, and here's some really good suggestions, and let's have a monthly call with planning staff and let's figure out what policy needs to be fixed, what needs to be new or whatever, things like that, because I think there's a lot that can be done again when we make a true informed decision.
But as far as zoning is concerned,
I mean, everything in general. I don't want to put any kind of blinders on now because we don't know what they might come up. One thing that I continually think about, and a lot of people, they look at affordability, and there's a lot of maybe a slight misunderstanding where there's a belief that we care mostly just about low income housing or whatever. To me, it's not just that. We need to look at all across the board, and I have huge concerns about lagoon side properties and especially our golf course and sea level rise, because they are just as impacted on what do we need to do to make sure these communities are protected, because at their own scale, their affordability might be going off the charts as well. And we need to factor all that stuff in together because, like I pointed out before, a well-planned community has a place for everyone. And the ones that are facing immense pressures with houselessness and lack of affordability, it's because for decades they only focused on planning for a particular facet of a socioeconomic group or whatever. And they didn't think that, oh, we need the entire spectrum of people, we need a place for them, and it all works together. And that's going to alleviate a lot of the problems that we're concerned about.
To your comment earlier about the city buying up land,
Mhm.
there's a couple huge lots on Federal Highway, South Federal Highway, that have been open for a long, long time.
Yeah,
And even before, I mean, I drive by them,
the same.
but even before the sort of latest boom,
Mhm.
the prices of those, I've talked to people about it, because I think, oh, we should buy. The prices of those lots make acquisition
Difficult now.
difficult.
Yeah.
I mean, just, they're gonna sit on it until somebody comes along and gives their price.
Mhm.
And it's unfortunate because there are quite a few that, oh, wow, okay,
Oh,
that, thank you, Peggy. That are
Yeah.
big enough to do something. We're working with, 821 South Dixie Highway, trying to,
Mhm.
figure out with the developer how to do that as fixed income over 55.
yeah. Yeah, and that's like a long-term plan. I mean, we discussed this with our city manager. I did, or just, multiple times, including just earlier today. And it's like, if we had a blank check, right? Maybe Tuesday night, one of us wins Powerball.
hope so.
And and we could put 100 million or whatever in a land acquisition fund, because I see those same lots too. A lot of empty grass fields that could fit easily a nice size little apartment building to
Little
boost.
tiny house.
Yeah, there's so much opportunity and there's a lot of land banking going on, unfortunately, to our disadvantage. But if we plan for these things long term, and if we're ready and we get to a point where we can acquire those lands and in a lot of places, if let's say we buy a building for 500,000, and this happens, I know Pompano has a pretty good land swap program from my understanding, where we acquire a building for 500, we sell it to a developer for 600 and say, have at it, you're going to have an awesome project, but by the way, we're going to sell it to you for that much. That extra 100 goes into a fund, whatever it may be, mobility, affordable housing, health, whatever we want to put it towards. But the incentive is you get a second project. We own this empty lot here, and we really need, according to our study, this number of units of $1,000, $1,200 rent a month rent buildings, and we're 20% of the way there. If we give you this piece of property, can you do that project to our specifications?
Yeah, I mean, creative, and the CRA has been very busy acquiring empty lots and houses, and they're always looking for more. Commissioner Reagan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A couple things that I would like to see on the scope is what are our current amount of affordable workforce and fixed income housing that's available now,
Privately owned,
privately or,
Or
I
whoever.
mean,
Whoever.
including privately.
yeah, whoever. That includes Lakewood Towers.
Mhm.
What do we have now versus what is slated to come on? Projects that are already in the pipeline. I would also like to see what are the number of rentals versus owners that we have that have deed restriction, and when are those deed restrictions for affordability being lifted? So the first round of NSP houses was, I believe, 18 years ago. And if some of those houses are going to be out of deed restriction, we need to plan for that and see how can we extend them? Can we bring them back into affordability? So that's important that we know.
Mhm.
Because if we look at, okay, we have, let's just call it 115 affordable houses, but we're gonna lose because of deed restrictions, 25% of those,
Right,
we
right.
need to know that data. So I would like to see that in this study.
I'm gonna
My
have
other
to
question
see if we can
is-
Kind of write something to Carmen, but how are you?
Hello?
Hi, William. Do you have something to
Nope, He
add?
just muted himself. My other question is to legal. Oftentimes in gated communities, when you buy an empty lot, in the contract, it states that you have to develop that empty lot within 26 months
Mm,
and you have to bring it up to X amount of dollar value. Is there anything we as a city can put on the books for these empty lots, since we can't buy them, we don't have a community land trust right now, that says if you buy parcels bigger than A, B, or C, we will give you 36 months to put forward a plan to develop it.
You mean the new owner?
Yes. I mean, it's done in gated communities all day long.
Well, that's quite different.
Well, no, because it's not private land. You're still buying it from a developer.
But they're not subject
But
to
it's
takings
private.
clause. Yeah.
It's private.
So is there anything that we can do in regards to that? And we can't buy, the CRA cannot help us on that land on federal.
No, no.
Well, that's why we need to do a feasibility study and make sure that we can extend the CRA. Because if we extended them right now, they could be helping us acquire those developers, right? Or they could be working on getting
The
funding for it.
prices of those lots are so.
But is there
crazy.
anything we can do legal to, because I hear what you're saying, Commissioner Diaz, and we all know there's a lot of developers in the city who are land banking and writing off our city against their income from
Mhm.
other cities.
A lot of commercial property.
So what can we do? Is there anything legally that we can do to protect the residents in our city?
Well, we've talked about this too, and there's always a question of like you mentioned, the commercial properties that have been sort of land banked and many stand vacant, is there something that we can do? It's not a pop quiz. Can we put restrictions on them? Can we make them put public art in the buildings? Can we make them look a certain way? We haven't really, in the list of things that we have to deal with in the past year and a half, haven't really gotten there yet. Okay.
So there are land development regulations that you can put in place. You have land development regulations now. You all have built and recently adopted an affordable housing, workforce housing program that can apply to various uses of land when they're being newly developed or redeveloped. If you can, what you're asking, your initial question is if you can have a regulation in place that restricts the timing of the development of land when it's so large of an acre. And no, you cannot do that. So that's a private property protection right that, you can own your property and develop it or not develop it as you please. You can have regulations about when you start developing it, what you can and can't do with it when, because based on location and size and those types of things and your zoning. You can with your affordable and workforce housing, if you were buying and selling properties as the owner, and you wanted to make sure that they were developed in a timely fashion to serve the purpose that you were selling them for, then you could put a time restriction on the development of those lots in that manner, but.
Right. As a condition,
As part of your sale. Mhm.
yeah, but not just, if we're involved, not if we're not involved. Commissioner Stokes.
Are there other states that have more flexibility in what you can do to encourage land development?
Maybe.
Well, I'm just curious if we're getting the study and we're seeing that this land banking, if this is a contributing factor to the housing crisis that the whole state is feeling, could we bring that to our, we can bring it to our representatives and say, hey, you guys are finally using the Sadowski fund for some of it for what it was intended for. Maybe you're open to helping out in other ways. And then they can say no, but we've showed them the data and it's their choice to ignore it or not. So I don't want to just go to them and say, do something. But if we could think of, after we get the study back, think of what could help us? What's blocking us? If it's something happening at the state level, then we need to, raise that issue and with our state legislatures.
Blocking us from doing what?
A vacancy tax or anything if there's solutions that we want to put in place, like to encourage more development to use these vacant land, then we can say to our representatives, can you please bring this up at the next session and try to make movement on this?
Yeah.
You can foreclose on properties that are not homesteaded, that you have code enforcement liens for. Six empty lots that have.
I want to have a chat with our staff about that because there's a couple specifically, they're essentially falling down and inhabited. And I'm told, well, they're in foreclosure, there's a code case, but it's, foreclosure has been authorized. Well, find out how much the mortgage is. And if it's actually quite a lovely, very well-placed, large lot. Find out how much more and go ahead and foreclose. I don't understand this hesitance that we have about foreclosing. I was very active when I knocked down, in the 90s, I knocked down a lot of houses. I mean, we always called Yes to Your Village before we did, so they come and get what they wanted out of them. But we foreclosed on some properties. We demolished the Kenwood Hotel, for heaven's sake. Which was, yeah, I want us to, because we can flat fee to outside counsel. I mean, that's the kind of thing that either Glenn's firm can do or work with another counsel. And, flat fee, I mean, foreclosures are not, it's not rocket science. Mhm.
On that last. And I know that 2 of those lots have been split 10 times, catching clearing lot.
Oh, no, it's
And
insane.
so that homesteaded, they were just.
Right, and
are maintaining, we're maintaining, and if we can go that route, and they're ignoring us, and these are out of
Yeah.
town, out of state people, who's are land banking here. I
Yeah.
will pay, I was.
I would like to see a more active foreclosure program. I
And
really would. There's really no reason not to. And
And
even
even-
if we get it with a mortgage, okay, let's say there's $100,000 mortgage on a piece of property and we foreclose and we get it. It's worth more than $100,000. Anything right now is a 25-foot lot in the city is worth more than $100,000.
And even beyond having property available for housing and stuff, just from the attractive nuisance,
Right?
health and safety
Absolutely.
aspect, the
Yeah.
unofficial landfills, as I call them, that exist in the city are, we should not be tolerating them.
Mhm.
Can't fence them. It's like, okay, well, let's go after them. And we can put that-
I'm
Yeah.
sorry, Commissioner, can you turn on your mic?
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
Thank you.
When I tried to have the vacant lot conversation a while ago, we can't put up fencing. What can we do? And so can we acquire them through foreclosure because they've had so many code liens on them?
Yeah, no, I wonder why we're not a little
Matt-
more aggressive with that. Go ahead.
Madam
Sorry.
Mayor, maybe William can chime in. He may have some thoughts concerning our activity with foreclosure. I think part of it is maybe budget related, but William, please correct me if I'm a little off.
Well, it's a myriad of issues in regards to foreclosure. The city, for whatever reason, we've gone after a number of properties and we get into the complexities of challenges from the owners. There's one that we spent 7 years trying to foreclose on. There's another one that's been going on for 4 or 5. In response to some of the vacant lot issues, we did adopt an ordinance whereby our foreclosure rights can be switched over to the CRA and they can proceed with foreclosure, which they have done on a couple of properties. Elizabeth can elaborate a little bit more, but we're not guaranteed the ownership of the property, even if we do institute foreclosure. If there are tax deeds or taxes due or other things, we can be outbid. We lost 5 or
But
6
then it's a
properties
new
due to that
owner that's
reason.
Not gonna, then at least some motion's happening and we're getting paid our liens.
And that's happened, but we don't have a really good track record with foreclosures. We can definitely reevaluate where we are. There's not a very large budget for doing foreclosures. I think it's $25,000 a year from a legal standpoint, which kind of handles maybe 2 foreclosures a year.
That's a policy decision that was made at some point. Get some hungry young lawyer out of law school that just got his ticket, that's looking for a job. It really foreclosure is, it's very narrow. The laws that you need to do it.
So Madam Mayor, what I'm hearing, if I'm hearing a consensus from the commission that you would like us to be a little more involved with foreclosure and aggressive.
Yeah, we could only go after non-homesteaded,
Right.
places. And if we get,
Well,
yeah,
let us evaluate and look at it.
Yeah.
I'm not in tune to the foreclosure process,
Uh-huh.
so I'll work with William and get a little better
I'm
understanding.
not saying
of
it's
what we-
the end all and the be all.
No,
Of
but it's-
course, but it's
it's a-
doable.
Yeah, if it's an empty lot, if it's an abandoned boarded up home, 150%, you should be on top of that.
Yeah.
If it's a home that's has code issues, but they've got people living in it and renting it, I'm gonna say for right now, we have a big enough housing issue. But if it's an abandoned home, a falling down home, an empty lot, I don't know why we wouldn't look at it.
Yeah.
I agree
I'm
with
talking
the-
about the outside
vacancy.
wall has actually fallen off and been taken away. That's the dilemma.
No, I agree with the vacancy aspects. That's where we should be.
Yeah. Yeah,
Targeting
thanks for
first.
bringing that up. That's a really key,
Or that'd be a
Part of
good place to start, vacant lots.
yeah.
Mhm.
Public attractive nuisances,
Mhm.
safety, those things. My light was on, but William already answered it, and that was how much is the budget for foreclosure? 25,000 to me is like barely 2 cases probably. So
Well, yeah. they-
so like, do we have, is that, I mean, do we need to set up like a fund, or can we
use
just
ARPA
like,
money.
Well,
it's something to
if I
talk
might
about? for
interrupt,
sure.
there is a fund. It's called the remediation fund. And it was funded by the sale of surplus properties. We have not had very many sales of properties as of late, so the fund has been replenished by using general fund monies. That fund also covers for board ups, lot clearings, and demolitions. We are speeding up a little bit now with demolitions and board ups since compassionate co-compliance for COVID is somewhat behind us. There is also a portion of a budget there that lets us intervene on properties that are considered a chronic nuisance and put together a remediation plan if the plan is not implemented by the property owner. But that entire remediations fund budget for an entire year is right around $250,000. That includes legal, foreclosure, background title searches, the 3 activities I just mentioned, as well as chronic nuisance abatement.
Well, so there's money there. I mean, it has to be careful with it, but it's not like there isn't any money to do it. I just think that there are some areas that we can be a little more aggressive with. And I think starting with vacant lots, which we could then hopefully get to build affordable housing is a step in the right direction. Commissioner McBoy?
I just want to add my voice to support for that one, maybe related, I'm not sure related, but we're talking about empty lots and possibility of CRA or the city purchasing an interest that I think would be helpful for the cities to consider with that potentially small in an old house or in something, community center things. The Haitian community has looked for that for a long time. The Guatemalan Maya community has looked for that for a long time. I think it might give us an additional way to work back and forth between those communities in the city, both offering things to the communities and asking for things to improve life overall in the community. So that would be something to keep in the back of mind. It's very
Wow.
different from affordable housing, has no particular overlap with
Right.
that, but in terms of a need that's been expressed in the community for a long time.
Well, that's why we need a new city hall complex. So we can make this the community center.
Well, there you go.
Commissioner Diaz. I've got it all figured. I'm working on it.
We're
Okay.
all counting on it, right?
I bought a ticket.
I mean, I think there is overlap to that sort of thing though. Like, again, like I don't want to put too many blinders because I'd be really curious what the land use academics can bring up. But, there's all kinds of things like even our green spaces and parks, like if we boost the valuation of properties in one part of town, that can help us in so many ways as well. And that should all be factored in part of it. And community centers are a big part of it. That is a huge ask from both those communities for sure. And I think it's all part of growth management. We need, like I said, we need to find a place for everyone in the community and community centers, access parks, skate parks, dare I say, things like that all come into play into designing.
Shuffleboard courts.
Yeah. Designing, a really good community, and all should be considered, and I'm willing to hear from, the academics on that regard.
Commissioner Stokes.
I just wanted to make sure that we are giving staff everything they need in regards to next steps for the RFP, and then.
Is somebody taking notes?
Because I feel like it's good conversation, but I do feel like we are ping-ponging around lots of related and important issues, but I want to make sure that when we leave here, we feel like we've had this discussion, we're ready to go. So I know that Commissioner Lega had some very detailed asks as far as data. I like the wording that you have in here, Vice Mayor McBoy, that says some examples might include, because I don't want, we don't know how easy or hard it is to get things.
Right.
So list some examples, these are
intentional.
the kinds of things that we're looking for. And then I know the thing that I'm looking for that isn't in here right now is about, like I've said before, the effects and the impacts that this is having on our social services, on our, on the public as general, our institutions, that we all benefit from, like teachers and law enforcement and
Mhm.
all of that stuff. So I mean, I could come up with a list of specific questions, but I think my big takeaway is really wanting to know the impact and the effects of this on the whole city.
So maybe emphasizing the language more, the ripple effects, secondary effects. I'm not sure what the right name for it is, but that we're very concerned that we're pretty sure that there are some, any types of quantification or of, just sort of lining up what those pathways are.
Yeah, there's a,
Okay, I was just gonna call on you.
yeah, I mean, a really great example. I really appreciate like the vacant lot and the foreclosure talk, because it's exactly something, I think, a good example of what, a well-researched study could point out, because like we know it's a problem, but none of us have commented because I don't think any of us know the quantitative or the amount of what would be the effect. Maybe the study, like one example I can think of is maybe like the study can say, hey, this neighborhood is a food desert and you have X number of vacant lots, and if you acquire this percentage of them and one of them addresses food and affordability, then everybody's property values go up X amount. Like that sort of thing I would love to see. I know it's a difficult thing to calculate, but I know there's mathematicians and land use people out there who are talented enough to be that creative to, make that available for us. And then we can tailor our redevelopment efforts, even more fine-tuned to what we need and want and how much. And like I said before, setting up the goalposts so that we can measure ourselves on term as a city on whether or not we're doing what really needs to be done.
Also
Exactly.
holding ourselves accountable.
Exactly.
Ms. Davis.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Just to make sure we have clarity on our direction. I know earlier in the discussion, we talked about possibly putting a not to exceed amount. Are we still inclined to do that, or we want to keep it open? I don't know
understand
if
what
we
you're
came
saying
to a
about
decision earlier.
no limit. No, they got plenty of money. I mean, is there a number that everyone or not to exceed? I mean, we're asking for a lot.
We are.
I mean, it's not just
That's why I'm concerned.
do the
about
numbers and cut the city and
exceed
yeah.
amount.
Well.
Good.
Let me wait.
Please,
Hold on. I feel okay putting like a $50,000 limit on it. I am curious if there's,
No results.
do they come back, and have we ever had it where they come back and say, you can get this for 50,000, and then, you want to add on certain things like, or.
I think we can word it
Yeah.
to see if they can phase it or itemize it out.
You can also have an estimate of what you expect to see as $50,000, but not necessarily couch it as a not to exceed,
Okay.
so that they have a guideline of what you're thinking you're going to get. And you can, like I put it down in my notes with the, if you're gonna take a next step to assist with the option or to assist with the implementation of the plan or the reporting, then maybe that's an option that they
Right,
can
exactly.
do it, kind of
Extra.
propose as a phase 2 kind of thing.
I did
Yeah.
like the idea of going out to education first and seeing if a university comes back and says, you know what, we've been wanting to do a study, something like this, and if we can get paid for that as well. Because obviously housing is a major national and worldwide thing right now. So I think, I mean, would anybody be opposed to us putting it out to colleges or to education first?
My inclination, my own would be make sure that the language is written, that it is neutral as far as education or consulting firms. It doesn't discriminate. Right now, I think the language is very steered toward consulting firms in the evaluation criteria. We should fix that. I have no problem leaving it open to whoever. I suspect mostly academic firms will be the ones who respond at that range.
At that price range?
Especially, I was gonna say, especially at a not to exceed, yeah.
Right.
And especially with more like the innovative ask, right? And we're asking more than just inventory numbers. So I
Right.
think there's academics out there that are kind of hungry for this work. I feel like where they see the crisis, they see the numbers, but they want to tie it into
Mhm.
real world problems that we're all dealing with.
They can
not-
publish their stuff.
I was just, you just stole, I was like, it's a good publishing project.
Yeah, exactly.
It's perfect.
And if
for
it
that.
leads to a continued partnership where they help consult throughout the years and do
More
things
the
like
better.
that, then, you know, they might take the hit on the initial.
Okay, do we have enough direction for staff? Okay,
Have a
and so
start.
what's the next step? You'll come back to us with the language to for approval or,
For the RFP.
Right, with the draft,
right?
I guess, kind of using, I assume, some of the information
Mhm.
for text in this drafted
And some of what we've said
and some
tonight.
of what we said, yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of reshape
Okay,
to reflect that.
so, it's 6:09.
I have a,
Yes, yes, Commissioner Stokes.
um, will Valentina or somebody else help us try to craft some language around like criteria, acceptance criteria? Obviously, like, I don't think we have like a very specific rubric that we're following, but when people respond to these, don't they like to have a general idea of?
Yes, I will certainly be working with Valentina. I'm sure she'll
yeah.
be able to guide us through the process.
Okay.
And the more data, the more information they have, the better the RFP can come
Yeah.
back and.
Right.
They know how to write them.
And did you catch, I think we had an encouragement, I think there was consensus for it, to encourage the applicants. If they see things based on what they see and they say, you know, really what you need is a little bit more of this
Right.
in addition to that, to encourage them to do that.
We might, and again, I'm not writing it, but so the purpose of this RFP is to gather information for future planning of the city, kind of blah, blah,
Hmm.
language. Okay. It's wonderful to see you all. But
But you're thinking it's okay to go home? Is that what?
I think we've given the staff enough. It's
Yeah.
dark out.
Motion to adjourn.
I don't think we need one, but we'll take it.
I'll just
That's
say,
correct. We don't, but thank you.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say also, let's not forget the foreclosure movement, because that I think is separate from
Yeah.
the study and we can take action on that.
Yeah, I'd like to follow. I really would like to
Yeah.
follow. And then if you do a flat fee, some foreclosures are flat fee. We can hire a company, these foreclosure factories that have gone up against. They're amazing. So, all right.